The conclusion that all validation rules, even the simplest ones, must be handled by the domain layer poses some serious questions. How exactly should we handle these rules? Does it mean that we should get rid of the Fluent validation library and move all these checks to value objects that we will use in the controller? Because right now, all our validation rules are duplicated between our validator classes and value objects, which is clearly an issue that we need to handle somehow. And if we do move it to the controller, does it mean that we lose all the benefits we discussed in the previous module? Namely, our controller will become littered with the validation code because we will have to check the results of the create methods manually. Moreover, what about the check for the email uniqueness? It is also a validation, so should it belong to the domain layer as well? Should the student class handle this check for us? These are all great questions, and we will discuss them in the next module. This module has started part 2 of this course, in which we discuss validation in general and how it relates to domain-driven design. We talked about the always valid domain model. This is the guideline that advocates for domain classes, such as entities and value objects, to always remain in a valid state. The benefit of this approach, as opposed to the not always valid domain model, is that once you instantiate a domain object, you don't ever need to worry about its validity. This is a strong benefit that helps simplify your code and reveal bugs early on. In most cases during compilation, because it allows you to take advantage of strong typing and compiler guarantees. On the contrary, a not always valid domain model is akin to primitive obsession, where you use primitive types to model your domain. It is bad because the sets of possible states these primitive types represent don't align with the valid states of the underlying domain concepts they model. The not always valid domain model is equivalent to string typing, or the lack of strong typing. We used the taxonomy of the set theory to define validation. Validation is the process of mapping a set onto its subset. It is the process of deciding whether an item from the larger set, the superset, has a corresponding element in the smaller set, the subset. This process applies to any domain class, be it an email value object or a student entity. We talked about the proper mental model you should have when thinking of validation. View your domain model as a walled garden that must be kept valid at all times and therefore must be protected from the harmful influence of the external world. Validation is what allows you to perform such protection. It allows you to let in only the subset of elements that exist in the external world, those of them that conform to the invariants of your domain model. The rules that form the process of validation are called invariants. Those are the rules that dictate what is and what isn't a valid domain object. All validation rules, even the simplest ones, belong to the domain layer. They are part of the domain knowledge of your application. In the next module, we will talk about how to keep that knowledge in the domain layer while still benefiting from all the functionality of the Fluent validation library.